Gender norm effects on students. What exactly are gender norms? According to SaveTheChildren.org, gender norms are social principles that govern the behavior of girls, boys, women, and men in society and restrict their gender identity into what is considered to be appropriate. Gender norms are neither static nor universal and change over time. As a future educator, it is important to recognize what gender norms are and to ensure that you are not enforcing them in the classroom. It is very easy to recognize gender norms as it is the typical norm, but in doing so, we could potentially affect our students' confidence, self esteem, and even have an impact on their future career path because of these gender norms we grow up around and enforce. This topic of gender norms and being enforced in schools is one that is important to me and I can connect with because I can remember back in middle school, two of my friends who are girls wanted to try out for wrestling and be a part of the team. They were then told they weren't allowed. I thought that was so crazy and definitely not fair. It wasn't a norm for our school to have girls on the wrestling team, but I just figured that is because no girls ever wanted to be on the wrestling team, not because they weren't allowed. This memory is one that immediately pops into my head when I think about schools enforcing gender norms, and it just doesn't sit right with me. This topic got me thinking about how schools enforce gender norms and exactly the impact that it has on our students, and the topic that interested me the most was how gender norms being enforced affect students' future path of study and career path. When it comes to gender norms, oftentimes we may even say things while in the classroom without recognizing that it shows gender norms, like when we may ask for two strong boys to carry the materials to the teacher across the hall. Why does it have to be two strong boys and not two strong girls? Another way we enforce gender norms in schools can even be in the way we ask our students to do tasks, like asking all the boys to line up at once and all the girls to line up at once. If we use gender as a category, it is said to lead to more gender bias slash stereotyping, which can negatively affect our students. We don't want to put false representations into our students' heads by letting our implicit bias get the best of us. Even if we don't like to admit it, we all have some implicit or unconscious bias. When looking into the relation of gender norms in school, a common theme that I came across was the increasing gender gap in STEM related fields and an overwhelming male population in comparison to females. In comparison to men, women make up only 34% of bachelor degree recipients within the STEM field. How exactly do students enforce gender norms on our students? There are various subjects geared toward feminine caregiving roles like home sciences, languages, nursing, home economics, and so on that create female socialization. Subjects such as math, science, and woodshop are associated as more masculine, so that creates male socialization and interest in those kinds of careers later in life. Of course, students of any gender can take these classes, but it is also about what they see in the classroom. If we only read books that show boys working in construction or racing cars, and girls only being nurses and dancing, then how can we expect our students to express interest in things they can only see the opposite gender do, and recognize it is okay for them to do those things and be interested in that? Now that we see some ways that schools enforce gender norms, what can we do about it to try and avoid putting these gender norms into our students' heads? The first thing we can do is stop and think about what unconscious gender bias we may have. If we take a brief moment to recognize the unconscious bias we may have, it can help us to eliminate using gender norms within our classroom. Another thing we can do is talk about both genders equally in lessons. Instead of using primarily only he use he, she, or even they interchangeably. We can also read books that show people defying gender norms. Earlier on, I mentioned how asking students to line up using gender can be negative, so some other ways we can ask our students to line up are shirt color or saying things like if your name starts with J, or so on until everybody is lined up. There are various different things that we can do as educators to ensure that we are not enforcing gender norms for our students. This may not seem like a big issue in education, but in reality it really is because our students learn these gender norms at a very young age, and then that is their thought process into their adult life.